When was the last time you gave someone some critical feedback? I'm Christy Birchville, and we're doing a study through the book of Titus, designed around leadership. What makes a good leader? That's the question. And here we are in Titus. We're in chapter 1, verses 10 through 16. Now, I mentioned on the video yesterday, which, by the way, if you've missed any of these, there's a link in the description below. It'll take you to the full playlist. But I mentioned yesterday, I've spent a lot of time in the corporate world, specifically human resources. The most challenging topic to help managers and leaders deal with, one of the things they come to me most of the time asking for suggestions, help, advice, comes to having a discussion to provide critical feedback to somebody. If someone's doing something they don't like and they need to be able to address it, a lot of times the managers would just really struggle with how to have that conversation, how to get their point across, and how to ensure that that type of behavior doesn't happen again. I'll tell you, leaders really struggle to find ways to give that kind of critical feedback. And unfortunately, what that means is a lot of times they just don't. They just ignore it. They think, well, if I don't do anything about it, it will just go away. And the problem is that it doesn't go away. If people don't have something addressed, they assume it's fine and they just keep doing it. A lot of times these leaders would end up waiting and waiting and waiting until, unfortunately, things escalated to the point where they had to step in and they had to do something major to address it. And that could have been prevented if they would have been willing to have had conversations along the way. Yesterday, as we were looking through Paul's explanation of the character traits that really make a good leader, today he explains why the person needs to have those character traits. Titus chapter 1, verses 10 through 16 kind of talks about the situation that really was going on in Crete and why Paul was having Titus take some drastic steps anyway. Apparently, things had gotten out of hand. They didn't have good leaders, and they hadn't been providing that feedback that was so necessary. So in verse 11, Titus 1, verse 11 says, they must be silenced because they are disrupting the whole households by teaching things they ought not to teach, and that for the sake of dishonest gain. You see, these people were sharing and telling things, and they weren't true. And it had gotten so bad that they were doing this in all kind of households, and they were even doing it for their own personal gain, dishonestly. Paul said that's got to stop. We cannot have that in the church. That is not what Christ is about, and that is not how people who identify with Christ should be acting. Leaders must give critical feedback. If someone is doing something in the church that they shouldn't be doing, the leaders must go to that person and discuss it with them. And from what it sounds like there in Crete, the situation had gotten to the place where it was just completely out of hand. Paul explained that these people needed to be silenced by the leaders. When taking on a leadership role, that means we're responsible for all the parts of that role. Some parts are easy and people like us. Other parts are challenging and may result in people not always liking or agreeing with us. Nevertheless, our responsibility is to God, and we are to ensure that we are addressing falsehoods and inaccuracies in the church. Being in a position of leadership means that we will address the goods and the bads that occur, because all of those addressing need to be, everything that happens in the church needs to be happening for God's glory. And if it's not, it's got to be addressed. That's a leadership quality that has to be part of leadership. I hope that describes you and your leadership. I'd love to hear any other thoughts that you have on these last few verses here in chapter 1. We'll continue through chapter 2 tomorrow, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can join us then. Thanks.